how likely is ICE to target me or interact with me in some way while my adjustment of status application is pending. I focus my immigration law practice on marriage-based green cards, and one of the questions I receive from most of my clients is, how likely am I to be detained while I'm applying for my marriage-based adjustment of status inside the United States? And the answer to this is a bit complicated. It's more of a case-by-case determination, but generally speaking, people who have adjustment of status applications in the United States are not directly targeted by ICE. And that's another way of asking the question, how likely is ICE to target me or interact with me in some way while my adjustment of status application is pending? Because if you interact with ICE in any capacity, that will, in my opinion, dramatically increase the risks of being detained or placed into removal proceedings. To answer this question in any sort of meaningful way that has some value for people, I need to make a bunch of assumptions. So in this hypothetical, let's assume that someone entered as a tourist or on a student visa and they've overstayed their visa. Let's say they overstayed about a year ago, and now they're married to a US citizen and just submitted their application to adjust status to permanent residence in the United States. So to do that, you need to have entered legally or with parole, inspection or parole. If you entered illegally and you're considering marrying a US citizen and applying for adjustment of status, that's probably not gonna work. You're probably gonna end up messing up your case and placing yourself into deportation proceedings. So if that's you, stop watching this video and talk to a lawyer before you take any additional steps. Another assumption that I'm making is that you have no criminal history. You have no interactions with law enforcement except for maybe like a minor traffic violation. And I don't mean like a DUI, I mean like a speeding ticket, or you just got pulled over for failure to obey a traffic device or something simple like that. And the final assumption I'm gonna make is that you have no prior history of immigration fraud, you didn't illegally enter the US more than one time, and if you ever previously overstayed a visa, you didn't leave the US after overstaying. And the reason I say that is because if you did, you may possibly have triggered a permanent bar. So aside from all of those issues, prior immigration violations, criminal history, illegal entries, the majority of people who adjust status based on marriage to a US citizen don't run any major risk of being targeted by ICE while the case is pending. And based on my experience, that extends to people who've overstayed a tourist visa and people who've overstayed ESTA, or some sort of visa waiver program that like Europeans and Canadians can use to access the United States. Allegedly applied for adjustment of status before his student visa expired, but ICE still went after him. They directly targeted him. It wasn't like a random encounter on the street. They went specifically after him while he was dropping his kid off at daycare. But he's from Iran, so that might be a bit of an aggravating factor. And around the time he got detained, there was a bunch of stuff regarding Iranians in the news that made them like a priority for the Trump administration. But on that note, I've seen multiple Iranians since that case get their green cards through marriage-based adjustment of status. So I don't actually believe the government is directly targeting those people. So I don't actually know how relevant it is now today in October 2025, whether you're Iranian or not. Now to get to the main point that I wanted to make in this video. I think that the majority of people are most likely to have problems with ICE if they're traveling domestically within the United States while their adjustment of status application is pending. Just think about it practically speaking. If you've overstayed your visa and you encounter an untrained ICE officer on the street, they're probably gonna say, oh, you're out of status, you need to come with me. And then they're gonna detain you, and then you're gonna have to just deal with that from a detention facility, even if you're currently lawfully present because you have an application for adjustment of status pending. From what I've seen, ICE officers don't really care anymore that you have an adjustment of status application pending. They're not gonna go after you just because you have that application pending, unless you have one of those other aggravating factors like criminal history or even A criminal arrest that has not yet resulted in conviction can still trigger enforcement action by ICE. We've seen that happening a lot recently as well. But generally speaking, what I tell my clients who are applying for adjustment of status through marriage is, as long as you don't encounter an ICE officer on the street or at the airport or somewhere domestically within the US, there's a really high probability that if we can get through this process, you'll become a permanent resident through this marriage-based adjustment of status process. Again, it's case by case, so this doesn't necessarily apply to you, but if you want to see if you have a strong case, you could always reach out directly and I could do a consultation with you, tell you what the strengths and weaknesses of your case are, what the probability of success is, and then we can make a reasoned decision together about whether or not it's in your family's best interest to continue with the adjustment of status process. But I do think most people don't really run the risk of having major problems with ICE. And I do, on that note, discourage people from traveling domestically within the US. The adjustment of status process for marriage cases right now is pretty fast. Within a few months, we're seeing cases finalize and get to an interview. And then usually within a month of that interview, if the case gets approved, you'll receive your green card. So to the extent possible, I try to discourage people from traveling domestically while the case is pending. You've waited this long, just wait a couple more months until you get your green card, because if you want to take a flight and the off chance that you encounter an ICE officer actually ends up happening, you might end up detained or in removal proceedings, which is going to, at the very least, make the adjustment of status process much more expensive. All right, guys, that's it for today's video. If you're interested in learning more, or if you want to speak to me directly, you could always schedule a consultation. My information to schedule a consultation is in the video description below, and I do handle cases nationwide, so you don't need to be in the New York region to reach out to me or to have me or my office represent you in your immigration matter. If you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe. I put out a couple of videos each week trying to keep you informed on all the recent changes to immigration policy under the Trump administration. So if you're interested in that, be sure to subscribe, check out my other videos, and I'll see you guys next time.